Hi, this is Jen from Windward Blooms. Today we're going to design some centerpiece hoop wreaths. There's two ways to do this, and one is to create them on the metal ring with zip ties or wire, and the other is to actually create it without the metal ring, and I'm going to demonstrate both ways. If you use zip ties and wires, just as I showed you, the flowers are going to go over those spots. So to start off, your hoop ring, I've actually spray painted one side of it just so in case it shows a little bit, it's got some of that green tint to it like the greenery, and it feels more like a stem. And we're going to start off with the eucalyptus. The eucalyptus comes in these long stems with multiple pieces. And if you're going to create this hoop wreath, you'll see that I love to just keep them as is, but it won't quite fit around the entire ring. So I'm just demonstrating here what happens if you sort of bend the stems in place. You get pretty close to being able to maybe go around just like this, but I like to have a little more control, and I don't want there to be any gaps on my hoop. So if I want to keep them straight like this and not cut them all apart, one way I can do this is by not using the hoop. So what I'm going to do is take away the hoop and show you. If you prefer to either create a hoop wreath that's smaller than the 12-inch ring, then this would be one way you could do it. So you're going to bend that main stem, and I'm going to trim them down because honestly the end stems are pretty long and you don't necessarily need all of that excess. And then once I've trimmed those stems down with my wire cutters, what we're going to do is bend the stems and actually zip tie them together. So I have sped this part of the video up just a tiny bit to make it go a little faster. So you're going to take two of the stems and you would take a zip tie, and you're going to make sure to really tightly zip tie that bottom stem around, not the very tip top, but you know, a couple inches down or so on the other stem. Your goal is to have as few zip ties or little wires as possible because then there's less to cover up. It takes all three of the longer uncut stems to make a good enough size hoop to fit around, let's say, a lantern or a bunch of candles. So again, I'm going to come and zip tie the main stem on the end, and then we're going to be left with the stem. Of course, take off any tape on your stem like I have there. And once you get that on, you're going to take that final end and you're connecting it with the top of the very first one. And that tape liked to stick there. Oh, now it's still on my hand. So once this comes around, you'll see that one of the reasons I don't love doing it this way is you have a lot of these extra stems coming off. Now, if you want that really organic look to your hoop wreaths where maybe it's like eucalyptus kind of just going in all directions, this is actually a really perfect way of doing it and probably the easiest. This took 3 zip ties, and I'm going to show you how, if you don't love the pieces of eucalyptus kind of going all over the place, you can actually fix that up a little bit. So what I like to do is take the stray eucalyptus stems and I can wrap them. So this creates a much more neat and clean look. The other is a little more wild and boho, just depending on the look you're going for. It's not going to be a perfect circle. It's not necessarily going to look as cute on a wall later, just because it's going to have more of that organic, wild shape to it. Now the next thing I'm doing here is twisting leaves. So one of the things about this is it's not meant to be looked at in this direction. It's meant to be looked at from the top. So the leaves, much like in nature, are kind of going in all different directions. But since we're on a table and we're all looking at it from this angle, you do have to sort of twist the leaves around. And so one way I like to do that is to just take them and twist. If they don't come off, you can gently pop them off and put them back on. I wound up cutting this piece off because it was just going in a direction I didn't like, and I'm going to take a tiny piece of wire and go right in where that other zip tie is, since I've already done it real tight, and just wrap it into place. This way it kind of evens out the look of the wreath a little bit for me. So this is just one way to do your hoop wreath a little more organic and natural. The next thing we would do once you've twisted all of your pieces of eucalyptus around is you'd wire your flowers on. You can get sort of the vague idea. This is the first way you can create your centerpiece wreaths, organic, natural, simple. But now I'm going to show you the other way that I intended. So you're going to start again with the hoop. And instead of keeping your pieces of eucalyptus long, you're actually going to trim them. And so each of these single branches has 4 smaller sprigs on it, or pieces that cut off. So you're just going to trim and create 3 to 4 pieces of the eucalyptus that we can shape and attach to the hoop wreath. You'll have a bit more control and the greenery won't be so all over the place or concentrated in one spot. So we're going to speed up the process here because honestly this took about 10 minutes and I'm sure you don't want to watch that in the video. So first thing I do is chop up all my pieces, place them around the hoop just to get an idea of where I want them to go and make sure that I have enough coverage and I don't need to spread them out differently. It looks super cute just like this, and I'm going to be honest, hey, if I was just doing this on an indoor event, you could even just place these around the table as is without attaching them. But I love making them on the hoop because then later these are great take-home gifts. They can go up on a wall or a door. So I am using to start these little zip ties. They're clear. And you're going to be able to hide them under the greenery and place flowers in those spots. So it's really just like we did before. You always want to take the stem of one and attach it to the stem of the other as you go around. I did a terrible job of videoing this so you could actually see what I was doing. Now, you can use the zip ties, but you can also just use the pieces of wire. And the wire itself is just little pieces. You don't need them to be too long. And in some ways, you have a little bit more control with the wire and you also have a little bit less to hide. So that's a nice element as well because the wire is also green. So as I work my way around, one of the things I'll tell you is that the last part is maybe the most difficult. You kind of have to go in with, make sure you meet right on that spot on the wreath where you started and sneak your piece in. Now see all those little zip tie guys hanging there, just like with wires we saw before. You're going to want to go in and trim any of those zip tie pieces, just kind of keeping in mind where they are. And so I'm just going to speed this up even faster because watching me cut off the zip ties and turn all of these leaves takes forever. So probably 15 seconds is better than the 5 minutes it actually took me. So now we are ready to add our wood flowers. So in order to do this, you're going to want to stem or wire your flowers. And you can do this with a piece of 18 gauge wire, although I will tell you that in something like this, it actually works a little better to have a higher gauge wire, like a 22 gauge wire, just so it's more flexible and can easily wrap around your hoop. So to stem your flower, you're going to add a dab of hot glue to the back of the flower, and you're going to gently twist and push that little piece of wire in. And we are ready to add it to our hoop. So you're going to slide that piece straight down, and then you're just going to wrap that wire around the back of the hoop, 1 to 2 times, trimming off any excess. So I like to make sure that I'm paying attention to where the zip ties are or where the wires are, and you also want to evenly space these out. There's some things you can do if you don't hide some of the zip ties, such as taking an extra leaf and kind of gluing it into that spot, or taking some fillers and just kind of throwing something else in there to cover it if need be. So this wreath only has 6 flowers. If you have more flowers, it'll be even easier to cover all the different spots that might need covering. So just wiring and then adding, and I'm keeping them fairly even, and you'll notice that I play around with the leaves a little bit. So once I've got my wire on, I can kind of fluff the leaves or move them where I need to. And I always place my flowers first. Get that sense. If you need to take a picture of it so you can remember what it looks like, that's a great idea too. So you can see there's definitely a spot that I want to add a little bit of filler or something else to. I could easily pop off one of my extra leaves that you can't really see and glue it in that spot, but I'm going to take this Italian ruscus, and it has 3 little pieces on it. I'm actually cutting the taller centerpiece out and leaving the other 2 intact. And then I'm going to glue those in. And I'm alternating the double piece and the single piece just so it goes all the way around the wreath. So that was just from 3 little sprigs of the Italian ruscus. Cutting that center piece in each of those gives you 6. And I'm just adding a dab of hot glue, well, maybe more than a dab, a glob of hot glue, and then putting it in, making sure that it hits the hoop and or the leaves. And I'm even going to add just a couple of these bunny's tails because I had them left over from another project. And Baby's Breath is another great filler to add in. Grab it fresh, go ahead and glue it in, and then just let it dry out in your wreath.